Welcome to Professor Martin Carey, who's a medical advisor and trustee for the AF Association. Professor Carey, who is a cardiologist and specialises in heart failure, based at the Royal Brompton Hospital in London, UK. Today, Professor Carey is going to explain who and what is NICE and how can we, the patients, become involved.
Thanks very much, Trudy. So NICE, or the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, it's had several names over the years. It's been around for 20 years and was actually set up on April Fool's Day 1999 by Frank Dobson, who was the Labour MP for Health at that time. And the reason it was set up was that they had noticed around England that different areas made different decisions about new drugs and about how to manage different conditions. They called it the postcode lottery. And they wanted to try and reduce that by setting up a respected but independent arm's length to government body called NICE. So that was set up, and over the last 20 years it's produced a massive amount of guidance to the NHS in England, not just on new drugs and new techniques and surgeries, but also on guidelines and quality standards for care. And of course, central to all of that has been the involvement of patients and just normal day-to-day people influencing what the guidelines look at, what they say, how they weigh the evidence, and the final recommendations.
Thank you. So you say patients can become involved. How?
So NICE involves patients and advertises regularly actually for patient representatives to join their guideline committees, but also the quality standards and the technology assessment programs. So there's always two lay people, as they're called, on those committees. And my experience of being on a committee is that you're not asking those lay people to become scientists overnight or clinicians. You're just saying, point us in the right direction. Is this important to you? Are we just splitting hairs? What's really the priorities for you? What do you think is done badly? What is done well? Where does this fit into the jigsaw? And that kind of conversation with all of the different stakeholders is quite unique, actually, in terms of technology assessment across the world. And others have now started to copy NICE. So patients can get involved on those committees. As I said, there's adverts that go out quite often. There's a patient council that was set up, so to regularly meet and talk about the direction of travel. And of course, that's all more challenging during COVID times, but definitely the patient voice. So I don't like the word patient. I prefer just, citizens' voice in all of this decision making, and weighing up evidence is hugely important. So if you have the opportunity and you've got the time, then please do volunteer. It's really important that we hear from people.
So Arrhythmia Alliance, AF Association and STARS, we're stakeholders, as NICE call it, and I've sat on many committees and we respond to many of the consultations that come out. But where does the citizen find out about this? Because all too often we may hear about NICE on the news, but for the majority of us, we don't know what NICE stands for, although you've now explained that. But how, they can volunteer, but how do they ever get to hear about it? Where should they be looking?
Well, NICE has a very good communications department, and they try, and they've got social media. So they've got a Twitter page, they've got a LinkedIn page, a Facebook page. So please follow them and you'll see some opportunities that are available then. They also do advertise to try and get people onto the committees. I think they're relatively successful. There's always more applicants than there are positions, and sometimes 8 or 10 times more. And so that's interesting to have so much, the fact that NICE is connected with our community is really important to make sure we're going in the right direction. And the other way that lay people influence it is, I used to sit on the board. I'm just finished a 4-year term as a non-executive director, and there are 8 of those, and they come from a wide spectrum of walks of life. Some from the business community, some from social care communities, others clinicians, and they also help to just cross-check that NICE is going in the right direction and it's still relevant to the society we're part of and the key decisions that we're facing. And Trudy, I know that the Arrhythmia Alliance and the AF Association are stakeholders for any relevant guidelines. And I think you'll probably agree that you can influence what NICE comes up with. They have their first assessment, but then they will listen to people. And if they have good arguments, they will go in a different direction. So I think it's important to realize it's not a kind of monolithic organization that just gives out statements. It actually is trying to engage with the clinical, public health, social care communities and real life people in the country to come up with really good guidance, and then also to steer NHS England as to what they should fund of all the new drugs, all the new therapies, all the new procedures. What would be fair to fund? Is the price point right? And quite often behind the scenes, there's lots of reductions going on in pricing of various innovations so that we can have access in England, at least, to these new technologies, including drugs.
Yes, and I've sat on a NICE committee where they've explored how they can engage better with patients and the layperson. So I know NICE are trying everything they can. And yes, you can change their decision. We were the second organisation in NICE history to change a decision a few years ago on a new antiarrhythmic drug. They had ruled against it, and we provided enough evidence that they actually changed their decision. So it is important that we all have a voice to influence. So that's how to become involved in NICE. How does a NICE guidance or a technology assessment affect me, the patient? Is it law? Does my clinician have to follow NICE guidance? Can I quote it chapter and verse? What does it actually mean to me, the patient?
Yeah, so there's two answers to that really important question. One is a guideline. So for example, if you have atrial fibrillation, what would you expect for diagnosis, for discussion with your clinician, the treatment options, etc. NICE is very keen on shared decision making. So it's a conversation between the clinician and yourself. They also issue quality standards related to those guidelines. Now, they don't have any legal force, but they're very much a kind of benchmark that most healthcare communities would judge themselves by. And if they weren't delivering on that, they would feel that it wasn't the right thing to do. So you would certainly use that to challenge if you wanted to, or just cross-check that actually you were being given the right information, the right things were being discussed with you or your relatives. When it comes to new drugs or new devices, etc., and it's a technology assessment rather than a guideline, that has legal authority. So for example, you might read in the press that a new trial has come up with a drug and it seems really good, and you're thinking, oh, that's really exciting. I must go pop along to my GP and get that new drug. GP probably hasn't heard of it. It's not yet even licensed, so the company's still not allowed to actually promote it and market it in the European Union area. Let's say it then goes through that. Well, yes, the doctor then, because it's got a license, could use that drug, but it may not be funded by the NHS at that point. NICE has to give its recommendation to NHS England, saying that the NHS would fund this, otherwise you'd have to pay for it privately. Now, to be honest, in cardiovascular care, 85% of things are given a strong recommendation on clinical effectiveness, cost effectiveness. NHS should fund it. So for cardiovascular care, there's very few treatments that are not fully funded by the NHS, but it can take some time from the big trial results and media splash on the front pages until the license and then the NHS coverage of that drug comes through. So slightly different things, but I think in general, if NICE says yes, that's a good marker that that's something that should be being offered to you or at least discussed with you.
Thank you, Professor Cowie. So if you want to search the NICE website to see if there's a guidance on a drug that you're interested in, a technology, a condition, or perhaps if you'd like to become a volunteer for us to sit on a NICE stakeholder meeting or to review different guidance, etc., then people should contact us because we're always looking for volunteers. There's nothing like someone who's living with the condition 24/7 to give their feedback.
Absolutely. We need to hear those voices at every level, and NICE is very open to that. You mentioned the website, Trudy. Yes, you can go to the NICE website, you can type it in, but it's probably even faster just to go onto Google and type NICE guideline and whatever condition or anything you want to, and it will pop up in like 20th of a second, the best web pages for you. It's really fast and efficient. You can then find it, work your way through, and there's always a kind of patient patient-facing summary of really even complex documents. So you should find the level that you're interested in and you want to read. If you want to read more, you can go down into endless layers of detail, but the top line is usually enough to help doctors and patients know what should be available.
We have an excellent relationship with NICE, and they often ask us to either draft or review the patient summary to ensure that it is easy for all of us to understand. So anybody watching this wanting to become more involved, please contact us, or if you want to find out more about your condition or treatment options, as Professor Carey says, Google NICE guideline and the drug name or the condition you have, and you should be able to find it. Professor Carey, thank you so much.
Pleasure.